Yo, this is Elliott Hulse. Welcome to Muscle Science and Application Podcast.
Muscle performance and nutrition research reviewed daily. Real-world application tips, case studies from top professionals and athletes. You're listening to Muscle Science and Application.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. My guest today has well over 1 million subscribers to his 3 YouTube channels, most notably Strength Camp, a channel that regularly highlights Elliott's knowledge on a variety of strength conditioning topics, often shot from his gym in St. Petersburg, Florida. Although he was previously at the top in the world in lightweight strongman and holds advanced degrees in exercise science, dare I say that much of his following has amassed from his amazingly insightful perspectives on more vitality, rugged health, a strong sex drive, better relationships, more abundance, society, and so many other topics. As Elliott puts it, I believe there's a strongest version of every human being. It is my mission to uncover it in myself and inspire you to discover yours. And so with those powerful words, it's my honor to welcome to the show, Elliott Hulse.
Hey, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. So what inspired me to have you on, it's funny, basically all of my guests are hand-picked. So it's like, I follow their stuff and I always think like, I'd love to dive more into a certain topic, or I've seen them talk about this and I want to, tackle that a little bit more. And so the thing that struck kind of a chord with me was when you talked about the seasons of life. And currently I just got done a crazy run. I did 4 natural bodybuilding shows in 5 weeks back in October and November. And I was traveling much of that time and honestly battling a bone spur in my hip that had been kind of acting up all the way since back in March, and I'd kind of been ignoring it and, just fast track through this journey, and then you kind of get done and it's all over. And I've heard you refer to before, like this idea of almost like a postpartum depression, like you create something and then it's just like when it's all over, you almost like hate what you created kind of thing. And then in this case, it's like having that injury, it's just kind of just getting me reflecting on this idea of like the seasons of life, because now I'm realizing like, crap, I was kind of an idiot. I may need to have surgery. I'm going to have to back off my training. It definitely changed my perspective on life as a whole, how imbalanced I became to do all that and wanting to bring more balance to life and things. So maybe you can chat with that. I guess since I was bringing up injuries, we could start on that topic. I know you had a bicep tear and you had some other injuries over the past. Maybe talk about surgeries you've had, injuries, recovery, how your mindset and all that in regards to this seasons of life. Maybe use it to develop yourself in other areas or something.
Injuries? Well,
Yeah.
I got to be honest. I haven't had that many. And the ones that I did have, namely the torn bicep, I used as a launch pad to develop a brand new version of myself. Meaning that I saw it as an opportunity to give up activities that I didn't think were going to serve the future or serve who I was becoming in the future. But I played college and high school football, really didn't have too many injuries. First real injury I got was at a barbecue when I was really hammered and a bunch of my friends decided we were going to go on slip and slide. But instead of just going on the slip and slide, we were going to sprint towards the slip and slide and tackle each other on the way towards the slip and slide, and whoever was able to free themselves from all the tackling opponents got to slip on the slip and slide. Well, I won and was able to slip on a slipping slide, and then I lost because I broke my tibia. So, that was like 10 years ago. That was my first real injury. Mm-hmm. And I guess that one just told me stop being a dickhead. And that was pretty much the insight I gained from that. And I didn't have health insurance at the time, so knowing my body and understanding exercise, I basically allowed it to heal and rehab myself. And then I went on to become a professional strongman after that, so it didn't really bother me to any great degree. I was able to bounce back as an athlete. And then I spent several years preparing for strongman. I became a professional strongman. I was slated to be the strongest in my weight class in America. And a few weeks before that, I popped my bicep. And that's not a really big deal. It's not a horrible injury. It's one where they go in, they give a small incision, and they pin it right back down onto the bone. So it wasn't career ending, but it was character ending, because I kind of saw it as a sign to evolve, and I took it as that. Mm-hmm.
And so maybe go into a little bit of that evolution. So what what did evolve, and what did you kind of cut out, and what did you kind of insert, I guess, in terms of your life?
Oh, during that time of my life, I was in heavy dragon slaying mode. And if you're familiar with Nietzsche, you know what I'm talking about. There's this time where you literally have to go out and give up being the beast of burden. In other words, he describes it as the camel. That character who is doing what the world has told him to do and is doing his best to carry the burden of responsibility, carry the burden of expectation that the world lays on you. But at some point, you're going to have to venture out into the desert, and you're going to face your dragon. And this dragon, he calls this dragon, thou shalt. And thou shalt is basically all the things that you've been told you should live up to, that you should be, that you should aspire to. Most phallic narcissist males like myself are trying to prove ourselves to our daddies. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of that going on. And when you do slay that dragon, you become what he calls a lion. And the attitude of the lion is very rebellious, doesn't really have its own home. It's aggressive. It's looking for a fight. And that's basically where I was. I was in this stage of slaying dragons and being a lion. And it was very yang, very male oriented, very out to prove myself, out to make it in the world, out to get it done. And you have to go through this. It's a part of personal evolution. It's a part of the rhythm of life, if you will, because I know that's what you wanted to talk about. It's one of those stages in the rhythm of life. And I recognized intrinsically that I was coming upon a time where it was no longer serving me to be this way. And I built a personal identity surrounding it, and if you just look at my old videos, I mean, I'm big, I'm strong. I mean, I have one video where I almost drop a 330-pound stone. Not even. I think it was like a 400-pound stone. I almost dropped a 400-pound stone on my leg. I'm coming up with it, and it's like I just can't make it, and boom, and I had to get out the way. I'm pushing logs that weigh like 330 pounds over my head and dropping it and just missing myself. So it's this adrenaline rush, yang, go after it, kill it attitude, beast mode that I felt served its purpose, but I never wanted to, and I continue to avoid this idea of full personal identification with any version of myself. And I saw myself becoming too attached to who that was. And I knew that there was a greater calling for me. People weren't going to talk about how much I lifted at my funeral. And one of the ideas that I embraced very early on in my adventures was shared with me by Brian Tracy. And that was, you create your vision by writing your obituary, or what people will say about you at your funeral. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had far more to serve the world with, my family, my business, my children, than lifting 300-pound logs over my head. And it was just a matter of time where I would eventually have to kill off that character. And I knew this. And again, we can talk about my history, but I have this tendency to continuously evolve, because I never attach myself to any version of myself. And with this feeling, I realized that, okay, well, I'm going to give it one last go, and I'm going to win this Strongman show, and then I'll give it up. And I guess the universe, God, or whatever you want to call it, had different plans for me. And about a week before I would have the opportunity to do that, my bicep popped while I was helping my dad garden in the garden. I broke my tibia playing with my friends in the backyard, and I popped my bicep helping my dad in the garden. Go figure. I played college football, 1AA, and professional strongman. I didn't really hurt myself doing those things. So I popped my bicep, and of course it was somewhat painful. Not as painful as people might think. But what was really painful is that the minute I heard the crack of my muscle being torn off the bone, I knew that it was the same crack of a gun being put to the head of a character that I know I needed to kill. And it was the first time that my children saw me cry. And it wasn't tears of pain. It was tears of gratitude for and saying goodbye to that stage in my life and that version of myself, knowing that I would have to move on.
Mm-hmm. How old were you when all that happened?
Oh, this must have been about 6 years ago. So, I mean, I'm 34. Must have been about 20, 28.
Yeah, interesting. It's funny. I'm just about to turn 28 myself. So, do you
You
find?
know, I once read that every 7 years we become a new person if we allow ourselves to be. You know, if you're living this game of life objectively, meaning you're here to experience life. You're here to have fun. You're not here to amass wealth so that you can have 7 generations of rich people, or become personally identified with any type of ideology. If you're here to experience life and all that it has to offer without attachment, which is really the way I live it, then what you'll experience is that every stages, of course, it's just an idea that was shared with me that I found fascinating. At age 7, you sort of go into a different stage where you move from being a child into an older child. You go from being a child to a youth. So you're 7 to 14. At age 14, you become a teenager. So from 14 to about 21, there's that stage of like you're a kid, but you're in an adult body. Then there's 21 to 28, where I tore my bicep and you are currently, and dealing with so many young people. You know, I that's what I talk to. I talk to mostly young men between the ages of 14 and 35, maybe a little bit older. And I keep seeing these crises that happen. Crises, right? Am I saying that right? Saying it right? At 14. So I'm listening to these kids and all their problems at 14. And I'm like, that's because you're changing. Don't be personally identified with what your parents have told you you are or you should be, and allow yourself to be free enough to explore what life has to offer at that stage. And it's wrought with all of its particular challenges. Then there's that stage at 21, and it happens again. 28, I'm recognizing through my own experience and through speaking with lots of young people. 28, it happens again. Mm-hmm. And the call to adventure is different at each stage. And so 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. I'll be 35 next month. I'm feeling it right now. And I don't know if you've been following my videos, but like I just ended what was a successful run at developing a YouTube channel that just surpassed the other biggest YouTube channel. I mean, I really have like the biggest YouTube channel in our niche. Mm-hmm. And yes, last week I decided the same way I had to kill that character that had the bicep tear, I had to kill the character that developed this amount of success mm-hmm. through this particular stage of building. And I'm moving on to what Nietzsche would have called, and of course I grow quickly and I might go through these stages again, who knows. But the child, after the dragon is slayed and you become the lion and you roam the desert, you roam the jungle, killing everything you need to kill, then the lion becomes a child. And the child isn't so much an immature version of yourself, but it's a more yielding and wise version of the original child. You become childlike in that you lack the adult desires to prove yourself, and you also carry all the wisdom associated with all the dragons and all of the evolutions that you've gone through. So it's I'll kind of keep you guys posted and see what happens during this phase.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. It sounds to me like it's basically developing a level of like passivity, like you let stuff happen instead of always having to make it or always having to fight it or whatever it may be. And I remember in an interview I heard you mention where basically it's like you've always been very reflective on yourself, and you said you've kind of started to let that go a little bit and not be so obsessive with constantly the self-introspection and stuff. And so I don't know, do you feel there's a time of life for doing that versus not, and does that oscillate back and forth, or is it in these kind of split phases where you have to jump in and out of that mode for 7 years or whatever it may be?
Well, I think you've always got to take an objective view of yourself. You always have to be able to remove yourself from your circumstances and daily life, and take a look. And that's really what wisdom is. Wisdom is being able to remove yourself from your circumstances and see with an objective eye, from the helicopter view, where you are in your life, how your past has created your future or has created your present, what that says about where you might be going later on. What type of relationships have you built with people, and how are you impacting the environment? How is the environment impacting you? So every once in a while, we have to do this self-objective self-reflection. There are times when, like I can tell you for sure, when you're slaying dragons, I know when I was, and my dragon slaying stage was 26. The numbers aren't exact. So when I say 28, you go into a stage. I usually am like a year or two ahead of most people just because of who I am. About 26, 27, I began slaying dragons up until, I'm starting to feel the change now, maybe like the past year, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. So about 7 years, about 6, 7 years. And during that phase, you basically have to shut off everything, shut off your brain, pick up your sword, and just start slicing. And that's what I did. It was just like, there's no time to think about anything except who I'm going to stab next or what I'm going to stab next, whose head's going to get chopped off. It's just straight up aggression. But even during that stage, when I didn't have time to study the way I am again now, before I was spending more time studying and then I was chopping heads. Now I'm starting to study again or be more self-reflective. Even during that stage, I had to meditate. In fact, I would have made it successfully through that stage if I didn't meditate. So even in meditation kind of was like the grease that kept the system smooth as I moved through it, and allowed me to remain objective the entire time and know when it was time to kill certain characters.
Sure. So you heard it here first, everyone. Even a strong man can meditate, and there's no such thing as being too big or too tough to do a lot of these things to grow yourself on all levels. And I think that to me is a common thing I feel like I see, and I'll be honest with you, I think I've been guilty of it. When you're in that slay mode, you're just like, I don't need to think about it. I don't need to, whatever. That's for like I don't know, hippie crazy people that sit there and meditate and whatnot, and then it's like when things come to bite you in the ass, you eventually realize that there's a place for that stuff. And so maybe mention, I've heard you talk in other interviews about how a lot of times you're quick to act, you're very kind of impulsive, and then so maybe reflect on this idea of being more quick to act versus having more patience. And is there? It sounds like you were kind of alluding to that, a season of life for both modes, and maybe a little reflection on times where doing one or the other has really bit you or really helped you.
I've always been impulsive, and it's gotten me into a lot of trouble, but I attribute a lot of my success to it because I really believe that the iron quality that allows us to, quote unquote, succeed in this world is courage. And I just had a conversation with a kid not too long ago where, we talked about goals and plans and blueprints and how it really is only 50% of the game. It's only 50% of the coin. It's only it's only a flip side of the coin, because the other half is, what are you actually going to do? Because you could spend all of your time thinking and planning and creating blueprints and studying. I mean, I find so many people, this is what they do. They live in books. They live in ideas. They live in this abstract world as opposed to actually taking action. And the way I am is kind of a thin slicer. Like, I just need a little bit. Like, just give me a little bit of information and the first step to take, and I'm gone and I'm going. And most of the time, like I think of people in my family, I think of friends that I have. Most of the time, I'm like 4 stages down the road and they're still thinking about it. Mm-hmm. You see, it could be, when I was a kid, it was basically stupidity. And we're like, this kid doesn't think. He acts on impulse. They gave me medication for being ADD, so on and so forth. As an adult, I call it courage. So, look at it either way. It's like, are you so stupid that you just take action without thinking about it? Which, I don't know, in my case, leads to success? Or is courage really the iron quality? And I like to share the idea that courage is the iron quality. Stop thinking, stop reading, stop studying, get away from the fucking books, turn off the computer, go and do the thing. Mm-hmm. And then you will have the power. See, a lot of people, they think that they can cultivate the power. And when I say a power, I mean a virtue. They think they can cultivate a virtue by reading more about it, or thinking more about it, or talking with their friends more about it, or hiring a coach, or taking a course. When really, it's like Ralph Waldo Emerson says, you do the thing and the power will be added to you. So I develop myself by doing things.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever hired a coach for like business professional development or?
Yes, I've hired coaches quite often. In fact, I have so many different mentors in different realms of my own personal development and study. So, one of the things that I do believe is advantageous to and supportive to us on our journey is speaking to other people who are a little further along than we are, or who are carrying something on the journey that you would also like to carry because you feel it would help you on the path that you've taken. So that means like technical skills. I have mentors in the realm of holistic health and philosophy, psychology, bioenergetics. These are people who help me in that way. Then I've got mentors in business and marketing, so on and so forth. So yes, absolutely.
Gotcha. So, could you maybe give us an example? You were talking about how being able to have that courage as an adult has really helped you. Can you maybe give us a concrete example or two where something that you accomplished and you're like, wow, that would have never happened had I not just bit the bull by, just did it.
Well, it's funny. I just posted a video. Well, for example, I just quit my Yo Elliott video series, right?
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, my channel is growing by 1,500 people a day and steadily getting, and it grows that way. So what do they typically tell you? If it's not broke, don't fix it. But my heart told me, I just felt it in my body. My body was like, look, okay, Elliott, it's time to move on. And it seems like the most asinine thing ever. And it totally, if you look on paper, or if you look statistically, or if you look at what would make rational sense, it's like, are you an idiot? And I had to battle, of course, my own internal dialogue, but then the world that has come to know me in a particular way now so many people are upset. I'm sure I'll lose about a third of my audience that like, well, what do you mean you're going to change? Well, I have to be authentic. I have to be true. I have to be honest. And that usually requires a significant amount of courage. It means you're going to do the thing even though all the odds are against you. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that's one. I just did this last week. And what I've done for the past several years is I've encouraged young people to do this in their life. So it's very funny. I ended this series by inviting my fans and friends to make a mashup video with all of the most inspiring words that Elliott has shared with you through his videos over the years. And at this point, I have over 100 entries. One of them that came up yesterday, I put it on my Facebook wall. I'm going to pull it up right now if I can remember. So I can tell you. I just put it up yesterday, so I don't know when people are going to watch this. But if you go to my Facebook fan page, I'll tell you the name of it, or you can Google it. Or I might even upload it to my channel. It's called Elliotts. No, Chris put that one up yesterday. Hold on. It's called The Strength Story of Elliott Hulse by Ryan Saplin. And he took all the videos where I basically shared my experiences that led me to my business success that I spoke about through my YouTube videos, and he mashed it up and he made a really freaking awesome video. It was really cool. And it relayed a lot of the different things that I actually went through that required courage. The very first one was, starting your own business. And then, I had a family. I had no clients. I was in a brand new city in a part of the world that I never lived in. I had no money, and I had mouths to feed, and I had bills to pay. We all get out of college with bills to pay, and I had a mortgage. And I basically said, well, I can't see how this is going to work, but I feel like it might. And I jumped into starting my own business. And that video that I just shared with you will relay that story and all the details of it. Mm-hmm. Then in that same video, he reminds me of how a video that I put up where I spoke about how, even when you don't have the money to make something happen, if you commit to it, the money just magically appears. Now, I can't give you the scientific reason why that happens, and I can't give you the philosophy behind why that happens. Of course, there are people who will tell you about The Secret and the law of attraction. Well, call it whatever you want. The bottom line is, this is what I did. This was my experience. And I know that you won't have that same experience until you do the thing, because you do the thing to have the power. And that basically means that one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to send my daughter to a private school. And shit, I didn't have $750 a month to send my daughter to a private school. But I said, hey, I told my wife, let's do it anyway. We signed her up. We had enough for 1 month's rent, 1 month's payment. And, a few years later, we didn't miss a payment. I didn't have it, but it was added to me because I took action, because I was courageous. Mm-hmm. Another one was, when we just decided that I was going to get out of corporate debt. I was in so much debt that I had to get out of it at some point, because I used all the old credit cards and loans to build my business, and my business wasn't making very much money at all. And the company that I hired to keep me free from bankruptcy said, "Well, Elliott, the only way we can do this is if you pay $2,000 a month." I don't have $2,000 a month. It wasn't even like, oh, okay, maybe we can get a little tight. No, we were as tight as we possibly could be. I mean, I remember having conversations about, okay, first thing we do is we turn off the lights, then we turn off the this, and so on and so forth. Like we had a plan for what gets rejected from our budget so that we can actually eat, because that was like kind of the priority. Mm-hmm. And at that time, the guy's like, oh, dude, you're gonna have to give us $2,000 a month. And I said, yes. Didn't miss a payment. It's these things. It's these actions that you have to take in the face of adversity. You've got to take action, even though oftentimes it doesn't look like it makes any sense. If you spend all of your time looking at numbers, you spend all of your time reading and thinking and planning and blueprinting and setting goals, in my experience, you get left behind. You get paralysis by analysis. And me, I'll be out of debt by the time, or I would have all the things that I wanted by the time you decided to get off your ass.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's powerful. So I guess with that, I mean, some people are probably listening to this and feeling very like motivated and compelled. And I think that can be a very powerful thing for some people. And then again, as maybe you've alluded to, like perhaps dangerous for some people if they're not in fact at a stage where they are ready to fully commit all in and make those actions. Mm-hmm. What would your advice be? I mean, can everyone do this, what you're talking about, or it's in
everyone can do it, but I see why they hold so firmly to forms. I see why they hold so firmly to abstractions and ideas as opposed to taking action. Because the one thing that taking action requires, besides courage, that most people don't have is a sense of embodiment, knowing themselves, trusting themselves, feeling themselves. You see, I take actions that always work out well because I feel. This is not like, oh, it's coming in my head or I was brainwashed this way. I can literally feel what my heart and my stomach is telling me. There are signals that they give me. I get muscular pain around this area. If I might not even know why I'm getting the pain, but I know something's not right because I'm like, damn, I'm not breathing. I can feel that there's something wrong here, and then I go exploring, or I feel it in my stomach. I'm in touch with myself. I'm in touch with my body. I'm in touch with my emotions. I'm in touch with the subtle intelligence that beats my heart, digests my food, grows a baby in a woman's womb without her having to do it. Mm-hmm. And I not only am in touch with it, in other words, I not only feel it and I honor it, I consult with it and I trust it. You see, and most people, this is completely irrational. And that's why a lot of people, they think I'm nuts. None of this makes any sense whatsoever. But all of our greatest teachers have been telling us this from the time the civilization started recording our ideas. I'm not much of a religious person in the sense that I don't personally identify with anything. But if you read from the Hindu to the Christian to the Muslim to the Taoist to the Zoroastrian, to all of the faiths, Baha'i faith, you just study all of the ideas that our ancestors gave us, the true seeds of those ideas. Even if you look at the roots of philosophy, the Hermetic philosophy, and the Hermetic texts, and there's a great book called the Kabbalion that kind of expands upon that. These are ancient ideas, pre-biblical. I mean, this is the foundation upon which most of our philosophies in the West grow upon. They're saying the same shit that I'm saying right now. The problem is that we live in a world that wants to hold on to things. We want to We want the numbers, and we want to be able to tangibly reproduce and say, yes, I've got it. When really, that's, like I said, 50% of the game. The other half of the game is, I don't care how smart you are, you're not beating your heart. Right? This guy, when I say you, I'm saying this guy's not beating your heart. You're not calculating how you're going to increase your heart rate as you go do a sprint. You're not planning on how this baby is going to grow in your belly when you're a woman. There is another intelligence within you that perhaps is more intelligent than the one that you think you're calculating all your plans with. Mm-hmm. You've got to sense that, and you've got to trust that, and you've got to go with it.
For sure. No, I actually heard you on another interview, and it struck a chord with me. You said, like, every time that, like, someone asks you, like, like, hey, man, how you doing, whatever, and you say, all good, or all great, or, like, fine type thing, and reality is, something really wrong is going on, you're basically saying it's like every time you say that and don't own how you're actually feeling, it's like you're getting further and further out of touch with yourself. And to me, that's just so powerful, because it's like, I think we do this all the time. We pass people at the office, we pass people wherever it may be, and just like, oh, I'm great, I'm good. And it's like, no, you're not. And so how do you tackle some of that? Do you ever tell people, like, actually, I feel like shit, or whatever it may be? Or
No, I don't, because first of all, I don't like people vomiting on me. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And I don't believe that it's necessary to explore the depths of our consciousness with everyone who says, hello, how are you doing? Sure. I think it's just a formality. How are you doing? And that's what, I kind of shy away from superficial relationships. I don't have too many, like, casual friends. Mm-hmm. And it's because of the mere fact that, like, if I'm going to get to know you, now we're going deep, and I'm willing to talk about, and it usually goes the other way around. Like, I dig in, like, I study psychoanalysis, and I work with a mentor in psychology, not because I want to be a world-class psychotherapist, but because I think these are really fascinating ideas that support us in getting to know ourselves and getting to know other people. So when someone who, like, I really don't have too much of a relationship with is like, and I ask them, hey, how you doing? And they begin, going down this whole path of, self-exploration with me. Usually it's like, well, do you want to make an appointment? Because I enjoy this shit, but I'm not going to stay here for 15 minutes with you.
Sure.
And vice versa. So it's perhaps one of those formalities that we should just get rid of. Instead of saying, hey, how you doing? Kind of just say hello. Mm-hmm. And leave it at that, because it's a bullshit question.
Sure. No, I couldn't agree more. So on that note, you said, you really like to dive deep with people. Do you actually do any kind of, like, personal mentorship or business coaching or development coaching, whatever it may be, with a limited handful of people? And I guess along those lines also, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on being able to kind of get your own shit square, if you will, before helping others, versus recognizing, like, hey, if I know a little more than someone else, even though I may not be the top dog, like, I still have something to offer?
Well, you're asking a lot of questions there, so I'm just gonna hop on the last one that you just said.
Sure.
Because I thought about this yesterday. I don't know what I was reading or who I was speaking to, but this whole idea of empathy, and how empathy allows us to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, so that we can support them from a place of their subjective reality, right? Mm-hmm. So that's really what it means. It means getting in that person's shoes, walk a mile in his shoes, because otherwise there's no way to really offer any type of support, So as a mentor, when I say that, it's because, I answer so many questions to young people through the internet, and then I work with people. We can get to that question in a moment. I work with people one-on-one or in groups. But I have to, instead of going to my book knowledge or going to the right answer for this particular situation or what I've heard or what someone else told me, I literally have to find a way to get into that person's shoes. And that's why, like, it may sound funny, and my friends will joke about it, but it's like somebody will show up at my gym and want to learn how to deadlift more weight. And I'm asking them, like, well, tell me about your mother. Mm-hmm. What kind of relationship did you have with your mom, and what country did they come from, and what was the financial situation like when you were born, before you were born, so on and so forth. Because it's like, I got to get inside you before I can really support you. Otherwise, it's like I'm just skating around the issues. It's like, yeah, you've got these muscular imbalances, and you're weak in this particular way, but why? And that's what really fascinates me. So to answer that last question about getting your own shit together, it was a book actually I was listening to. I was listening to The Neuropsychology of We by Daniel Siegel. So I remember now. You've got to know how to do that to yourself. I have to go deep in here before I can go out to you. Like if you study like shamanism, or if you're familiar, if you watch any movies, with these shamans or medicine men, or these individuals in a tribal society or in a culture. I mean, we honored them in many cultures. They oftentimes, when someone comes to them for support, they have to go into a meditative state themselves. They drink the juice and they light the candles and they breathe it, or they smoke whatever they have to smoke so that they themselves can go in. Because the more I can feel what's happening inside me, and the more free from ego constraints I am, the more I'm able to move into you. Mm-hmm. Or draw you into me. The more easily I can sense the vibes between us. You ever get around someone and you're like, I can't put my finger on it, but that person just makes me feel like blank. Mm-hmm. Either they make you nervous, they make you anxious, they make you really happy, they make you sad, they make you... So it's knowing yourself and where you're coming from, and not allowing... Because when you're really in touch with yourself, other people can't touch you. Because you're not necessarily protecting yourself, but you're grounded in yourself and how you're responding to the vibes of another person, if you will. Mm-hmm. So it's always about going home first.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so I guess expanding on that even to another level in terms of, so not just working with people one-on-one, building your tribe, if you will, right? Like all your YouTube subscribers and all these people that look up to you and want your advice and things. Let's dovetail that a little bit into kind of like business. What was the process you went about in doing that? Again, at what point did you decide, I have the ability to do this, or I have something people want? And then also in terms of like, at what point do you say, hey, I'm doing this for free versus, there's got to be a way to make a living of this for me and stuff like that.
Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, you're asking me, how do you go about taking the work that you do and monetizing it?
Well, I guess I just kind of the decision first, number one, right? So you put yourself out there on YouTube, right? And everyone's going to see your stuff, coming to the point where you're like, okay, I'm ready to do this, or I have something people want, or even if they don't want it, I don't care. I know that there's something I have to give, and I'm going to express myself kind of like as an artist, as you said. And then finally, where eventually you realize I've been doing this so much, I need to, if I'm going to keep giving to the people the way they want, I need to obviously just get my own stuff square and support myself. So it's kind of both.
Well, there's a great saying. I can't remember exactly where I read it, but to get what you want, you've got to give people what they want. And the more people that you can give what they want, and to the greater degree that you can give people what they want, the more you'll be able to receive. And that's life again. We talk about seasons, and we talk about rhythms, and we talk about vibes, and all of it really is an interaction between this. Mm-hmm. It's a giving and it's a taking. It's an up and it's a down. It's a winter and it's a summer. It's a night and it's a day. It's a male and it's a female. There are two sides to every coin. The problem is we like to get very attached to, based on either our ideology or the results that we seem to be getting that we're pleasured by, one instead of the other, right? But mm-hmm. Life keeps doing this. I mean, even if you study like molecular biology and like physics, I mean, there's like plus and minus, like negative and positive charges. It's constantly like this in and out thing, blinking in and out of existence. There's no boom, got it, one thing. Everything that's one is divided. It just keeps dividing. That being said, I never approached this idea of service without setting up the construct to receive. I think it's a silly thing, and I think it's one that we've been fooled into believing is virtuous. I give. You sound, when someone says that to me, I keep giving, and when am I going to get back? When am I going to receive? It either means that you don't understand the laws of nature and you haven't set yourself up to be able to play the laws of nature, or you're just not giving as much as you think you should be giving, or as you really should be giving. And maybe you're giving with the wrong intent. Mm-hmm. Do Do you see? But I always give with the idea that I'm going to give the best that I can, and I receive with the idea that I'm going to receive everything I'm worth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, spiritual people are funny, you know, because this whole idea that, you know, it's somehow pious to put yourself out there and deny anything coming in. What they don't realize is, like, you know, all the old ancient gurus and our masters and teachers of old lived in a society where it was a bit more socialist, if you will. And I'm not pandering for socialism at all. I kind of like this game that we're playing right now. But they took care of the medicine man. Do you see? So the medicine man lived in society, but the society knew they needed him. Mm-hmm. So they made sure he got what he deserved. And it didn't matter what line of profession you were in. They knew that they needed someone to do everything, and everyone collectively appreciated that person and made sure that they were well cared for. And, you know, maybe that's not the way, maybe that won't be the future. And obviously in the way we do things now, especially in our culture, but there's a lot to be said for it. Mm-hmm. It allows you to develop your skills of service to the greatest degree possible without having to worry about setting up the construct by which you will receive. On the other hand, you've got to realize that we live in a economic machinery that's kind of like every man for himself, and that there are principles by which you can follow, and there are mechanisms that you can let loose and create where people can easily give you for what you've shared with them. Mm-hmm. And with the internet, it's easier than ever. I mean, you could simply, like, you've got this podcast. Dude, you know how many people really appreciate what you're doing? Put a button on it that says donate. Just put a little button that says, hey, I'm happy to provide this talk show to you guys in order to help support me with the overhead. Mm-hmm. Please feel free to donate. And then you give them three options: donate $10, $100, or $500. And you know what you're going to get? Some people are going to give you more. Some people are going to give you less. Some people will never give you. But then again, when they take your ideas and they share it with other people, you're now also building a legacy. So it's just, you know, you're going to receive and give in many different ways.
Mm-hmm. One topic I wanted to quickly ask you is, you know, you always seem, for the most part, so enthusiastic when you do these things. And I think we all know that reality is, you know, we have our ups and downs and times where you just don't feel like doing the thing. And so how do you do that? I'm sure you must. I know myself, I go through this kind of ebb and flow where there's, you know, days where I could crank out like, you know, 10 podcast episodes reviewing like research articles, and I am just in the zone going. And then I might go 3 or 4 days where it's just, I don't want to do it because I'm like, I don't feel like I'm going to bring the same thing to the table, the same level of enthusiasm. And I'm always trying to get in tune with myself to where I can even that keel out a little more and generate quality stuff on a very consistent basis. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it depends on how close the wolf is at the door. You know what I mean? How close is that dog that's chasing you? Is he about to chomp on your ass, or you got some room to breathe? You could take a moment to just take a sip of water before he catches you again. Sure. And there are going to be stages in your life and in your business where, like, that dog is right on your fucking tail, and if you stop to breathe, you're done. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, during that dragon slaying stage. And it's like, you might not feel like doing it, but if you don't do it, you're screwed. Yep. And I remember going through that stage and recognizing, and I would invite you to recognize it, that's a stage. You're going through this rhythm. You're going through this season. There's a season where there's a dog chomping at your ass, and you don't have time to take a break. You just don't. Mm-hmm. You know, you'd like to listen to the physiology of your body. You'd like to honor the feelings and emotions in your body. But you know what? Right now, there's a dog about to bite your ass, and it doesn't matter what you feel. You got to do what you have to do. But also, and this is very difficult, because that is a resourceful place to be during a particular time of your development. But you also have to recognize, appreciate, honor, respect the time when that is no longer the case. Mm-hmm. Because many of us can get very addicted to that. I think in our culture, that's probably the biggest addiction. It's this addiction of, well, I got to keep going. I got to keep going. More, bigger. And it always feels like there's a dog nipping at your ass. You know, there are multimillionaires that feel like there's a dog nipping at their ass. And it's like, bro, you could take a year off and you'll be fine. Like you're rich. Like, just chill the fuck out. Mm-hmm. And it's because it's an addiction. It becomes a mental disease. You've got to be able to say to yourself, boy, you know what? And of course, it's been a challenge for me as well. And this is why I share these ideas. Boy, you know what? I broke my face open for 4 years. I can look back and say, I got a little breathing room here. Take a deep breath. Chill out. I put a hammock up in my office right now. I mean, it's only been about a year. I couldn't imagine having a hammock in my office. In fact, my office during my first stages was in a warehouse that had no air conditioning, no fan. I was in the upstairs. And I remember during the summer in Florida, I'm sure you're familiar, I'm sitting there with my shirt off, sweat is dripping on my computer keyboard, and I'm just hammering away at it. Tired? I have no time for tired. Sleep? I'll sleep when I'm dead. Today, I have a hammock in my office because I realize it's a new season. I can breathe. And if you don't breathe, and here's the thing, because you could say, oh, well, what are you, getting lazy? This is a trap the world tries to get you in, to make you a slave to their ideology. Well, what are you, getting lazy? What are you, getting old? What are you don't have that fire in you anymore? Not necessarily, dude. In fact, I realized that if I just take a little nap, my fire is going to be 10 times brighter than yours when you're 35 and you're burnt out and you have adrenal fatigue and you've got all types of digestive issues and skin issues, and your dick can't get hard anymore, and your wife wants to leave you, and you can't figure out why you're working so hard, but nothing is working for you anymore. And it's like you've got to take that objective viewpoint every once in a while, and that means you need to step back and relaxing, breathing, meditating, stepping away from the chaos is 10 times more powerful than continuing with the activity. Right? There it goes again. Which one is it, Elliott? Do I work like a warrior or do I chill like a king?
And it sounds like you say, you do that the warrior for too long and you get 1 + 1 = 2, whereas if you did the other, you get 1 + 1 = 10 or whatever it may be. Do you have a sec for another quick question, or we want to get going here?
Sure, I can go more.
Okay. So this Seasons of Life thing, it's kind of alerted me to a question I wanted to ask when you said this idea of you could take a year off type thing. Has that ever come to you in terms of training or being super focused on your nutrition or whatever it may be, or even people that you've advised where you're like, hey, take a little time off? And I know myself, it's like you catastrophize, like what's going to happen? And it's like maybe there's just that other season that's more important to tend to, if you will, right now, and you just let the other stuff slide a little bit and it'll come back.
You know, one of the toughest things, this is an interesting dichotomy, it's going to sound strange, but sometimes you got to build the balls to be a pussy. Okay. You know what I mean by that? Did you get that one? You've got to be tough enough. You've got to be courageous enough not to do something. So it might look like, oh, well, you're not doing anything. Don't be fooled. Don't be so fooled into thinking that nothing is truly nothing. Nothing is actually something. You know, I mean, the power of the window is the fact that it's nothing, but it's actually something. Well, what is this? There's a window here. Well, it's really nothing, but it's something because it lets the light in. We can't think that nothing is actually something, is actually nothing, because nothing is actually nothing. Everything is something. And this yielding is a very powerful something. It doesn't look like the aggressive something that you've become addicted to or that you've been told is the right something. See, we live in a world that believes that aggression is the only way. We think that violence is the only way and hard work is the only way. When you have to be courageous enough. See, you might be so aggressive that you're a pussy, right? There it goes again. It's like you're so tough that you're a pussy because you've got to man up to let go of that. Now, what kind of courage is that going to take for you to take a year off to do something that you know you're supposed to do? And again, I can only relate to my experiences, or in fact, not that I can only relate to my experiences, but I use myself as an example, and that's probably why people listen to me. I'm making Yo Elliott videos for this channel that is reaching 1 million subscribers, which is kind of unheard of in our niche. There's not too many, that are that big, and I have to man up to stop. I literally had to be courageous enough to say I'm not going to do it anymore. That requires a big set of balls. And so a lot of people, I receive some comments. It's like, oh, Elliott, what's going on? Are you becoming lazy? Are you becoming tired? Or is it too much for you to handle? It's like, no, motherfucker. What's actually happening is I'm growing stronger by letting go right now. And what I find myself doing right now is studying. Like I realize, like I really just want to study. I've got a stack of books this big that I'm just like, I'm going through, I'm highlighting. I bought journals and I'm writing and stuff. So it's like, you've got to let go of, if you want to grow stronger, you've got to let go of an old version of you to develop a brand new version of you, even though you might not necessarily know or can identify with what that newest version of you is going to be like. You've got to be courageous enough to throw yourself off the cliff and see what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I love that. All right, I guess I'm going to go totally off the wall here quickly because I think this will be useful to our listeners. So we've been talking a lot of stuff relating to doing the thing and trusting in it and doing things a lot of times when it doesn't make sense. And so I always am trying to provide, like, we have a Monday episode where I do like kind of business tips and stuff. And so to me, I view the muscle science and application as a full spectrum. And so for the applications aspect, it's like, I think so many people are going to hear this episode and be further inspired to want to make a shift in their life, to grow their personal training business more, to open their own gym, to do something like that. And I think one of the big things that holds people back is, a series of fears like, oh, I'm no longer going to have my corporate health insurance. I'm no longer going to have this. I'm no longer going to have that. Maybe you can just briefly reflect on some of these things. Like, I'm sure you found private health insurance. I'm sure you've done things and it's not quite as scary or as bad as people would think it is. And walk us through that briefly if you could.
I think we got to remember where we live. I think oftentimes we forget that we live on this rock that apparently they say has formed because there was a giant explosion, right? So really we're living on a piece of dust from this giant explosion that happened billions of years ago or whatever. And not only that, but we're spinning around at an enormous rate. And then we're also flying around, we're spinning around this giant ball of fire. And at the same time, there are other chunks of rock from this explosion that happened billions of years ago that are like whizzing past us. Zoop, zoop, zoop. And I mean, it's been hit. We've been hit by these things before. Mm-hmm. I think the way the Earth is right now is a result of like one of those things crashing into it and just changing the entire ecology.
Sure.
So when you say that you're looking for safety and security, you have to understand that chaos is inherent with being a human being living on this piece of dust. It's a figment of our imagination. It's a story we're telling ourselves. It's masturbation. It just feels good to play with ourselves this way, to believe that I'm insured. I'm going to be, hey, make sure you're insured. Make sure you're insured from disaster, safety, security. It completely is it's a game. You're going to be safe and secure and just fine as long as you know how to take care of yourself, as long as you can remove your consciousness from its attachment to the stories that human beings tell themselves, mm-hmm. which is safety and security. So, I mean, I think that's as plain and simple as it could possibly get. There's no such thing as outward safety and security. It just does not exist. I mean, look at all the people who spent years, decades, saving up all this money for retirement. Oh, I feel so bad, but yet I giggle at all the baby boomers, that generation that were so conservative, the yuppies that were so conservative, and they played Wall Street, and the banks really loved that generation because the way they were giving loans and the interest rates were always so low and the stock market was always going up. I mean, they were playing one hell of a game, but they forgot that if you invest all of your resources, you invest all of your personal identification into a fucking game, it could do as it did in 2008 and crash. Mm-hmm. Safety and security, my ass. How's that work out for you? You spent 40 years to see everything that you believed in and saved and broke your ass for. Squandered. Disappear. That's the game we're playing. That's the insurance that you're investing in. Mm-hmm. Live today fully, because you can walk out the door and be hit by a car. You can go to the doctor tomorrow and be told you've got 30 days to live, sir. Now what? Now you know what people do? Here's what people do when they got 30 days to live. Boy, I've spent the past 30 years saving up all this money, and now I'm going to go blow it in 30 years. Well, you know what? If you actually decided 30 years ago to invest in the moment and live life to its fullest, maybe you wouldn't even have cancer. Maybe you would actually enjoy living in the flesh so much that this thing didn't happen to you. This scorn, you weren't scorned in this way. Live in the moment.
Yeah, no, it's powerful. There's a podcast I listen to called 48 Days to the Work You Love with Dan Miller. Dan's based out of Tennessee, and he'll say that people have this false illusion that like, oh, you know, the corporate job or whatever it is super secure. And they're like, all it takes is one person to say, dude, you're gone. Whereas in the case of say like this, it's like, you know, whatever you have, 800 something thousand subscribers. It's like if 10 or 20 people don't like you, well, there's 800 something other thousand that do. Like which one is more secure? And then on that same note, it's like he'll always say, it's like, you know, people will be like, oh, I could never replace my income, or oh, I could never do what I want for life. And he's like, if you're making that much money, miserable and hating it, he's like how could you not think that being full and whole in yourself would, you know, just in abundance create so much more for you and for everyone else? And these are things that I've slowly been coming to terms with myself, and this is why I'm doing the podcast and growing things. And so, Elliott, I just want to thank you so much for coming on Muscle Science and Application and sharing all that you've shared with us today. And those of you that are not up on Elliott's stuff, you're really missing out. You should head over to YouTube, and you can find his channels, Strength Camp, Elliott Hulse, and then also it's called the Non-Job Movement or something like that, isn't it? Correct?
Yeah, you can search non-job. It'll just come up.
Yep, and find lots more insights on topics like this. So again, Elliott, thank you so much, and all the best to you.
You got it. Thanks.
Cool, man. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. That was fun.
Thanks for listening to Muscle, Science, and Application. We'll be back tomorrow. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. Find us at appliedmusclescience.com.